Hey there everyone, this is Samuel Johnson and welcome back to the Lyoko Retrospectives, and today we're going to be discussing episode 53 of Code Lyoko slash the first episode of season 3 of Code Lyoko, Straight to the Heart. And this episode is just kind of a refresher episode, sort of. It's essentially just here to get you up to speed on how things are going and where the show's going to be heading from here. So if you remember at the end of season 2, they figured out that Alita wasn't actually an avatar that lived on Lyoko, she was actually a human. Specifically, she was the daughter of Franz Hopper and had been virtualized onto Lyoko about some years ago and wound up getting stuck there with Xana stealing a piece of her, namely her memories from before she went to Lyoko, and just trapping her there. As such, ultimately, they managed to get that piece back from Alita, but unfortunately, Xana was able to go into her memory and steal what was called the keys to Lyoko, essentially allowing him to escape the supercomputer. He still can interact with it, but he's no longer limited to it, so essentially, even if they turn off the supercomputer, Xana's still going to be around. As such, this episode picks up sometime after that, at least specifically after summer vacation. The group And it turns out that the group ever since Xana got out of Lyoko, he's been relatively quiet. To the point where it just seems calm. Nothing has happened since the end of season 2. Jeremy, of course, doesn't buy it because Xana's Xana, he's up to something. As such, to try and get better keep tabs on Xana, he upgrades a super scan, what he'd been using to scan for towers that have been activated, so that no matter where Xana goes on the World Wide Web, they'll be able to find him, and it's a good thing too, because once he manages to get it going, it manages to detect Xana, and the instant it does, Xana launches an attack, not in the real world, but in Lyoko, specifically Sector 5. As such, once this happens, Jeremy sends the group to Lyoko so that they can go and investigate and as such, once they get to Sector 5, they find that wherever Xana is attacking, it's in the room below the entrance. As such, the group goes through Sector 5 and things seem normal, although Alita seems a bit more acrobatic than she usually is. She's actually the one that's able to hit the key that stops that countdown from rearranging Carthage. And as such, they manage to get outside the dome and manage to take their respective vehicles into the room. Once they get inside, they find a group of monsters attacking what looks like it looks like the map of Lyoko, as it's a dome that's full of all the various sectors and so forth. That's arranged the same way that's the map of Lyoko is arranged in the computer. It's in the lab in the factory. And for whatever reason, they're shooting at it, and the group doesn't know what it is, but they figure if Xana wants it gone, it must be important, so they gotta stop them. As such, one by one, they begin fighting through the monsters, but with every monster they take down, another one of their own gets devirtualized, until eventually the only one left standing is Alita and a creeper. Of course, the group thinks that Alita's toast, but Jeremy tells Alita, "It's your turn, do your thing," and just as the creeper corners Alita, she actually creates an energy orb and blasts it at the creeper just as it shoots at her, destroying the creeper and devirtualizing Alita. The group, of course, is shocked by this, but ultimately that shock is kind of upended when they realize Alita's life points drop to 0, and typically that means she's dead. But however, they end up seeing that there's still activity on the computer, and they go to the scanner room, and it turns out she's just been devirtualized like the rest of them. As such, it turns out that ever since they retrieved the piece of Alita that Xana stole, again, her memories of Earth, she's essentially been completely reconstituted. In other words, she's not tied to Lyoko anymore. Like, she still has her admin privileges, we'll call them, so she can still go into the towers and deactivate them, which makes sense. She's the daughter of Franz Hopper, why wouldn't she have those privileges? But now in terms of combat and exploration, she's just like the rest of the group, and she can create energy orbs now that she can use for offensive abilities. She's more acrobatic, and if her life points drop to 0, instead of just being dead, she devirtualizes and just gets sent back to the lab. I actually kind of like that, because that means she no longer needs protecting. She now can stand on her own, and I like that. Ultimately, this kind of brings us back to the orb. It turns out that what the orb that Xana had as monsters attacking was the heart of Lyoko. It was essentially the center of it all, which is why it looked like the map that we see in the lab. Essentially, if that was destroyed, Lyoko as a whole would be completely obliterated, and there would be nothing. And of course, which in a way I kind of like that. That's Xana's new end goal. He wants to destroy Lyoko because Lyoko is the only way that these kids can screw with him now. And since he's no longer confined to Lyoko, it means he has absolutely no stake in what happens there. So he can pretty much just destroy it, and he's fine. Since again, he's now in the World Wide Web. He'll just be okay. As such, now the group's main goal is to try. As such, it just kind of showcases that the group's main goal is to keep Lyoko safe, so they can continue screwing with Xana. Which means they gotta protect that heart and stop whatever assault Xana does in Lyoko from now on. Which I like that. I'm okay with that. It just shows the new status quo. So, but in terms of B plots, we've got two. One that's ongoing, one that got wrapped up in the whole episode. I'll start with the one that was wrapped up. It turns out that since it's the end of summer vacation, the group has gotten new courses and classes and so forth. And at first everything seems fine, but for whatever reason, Odd is not in the same class as Jeremy and Ulrich anymore. So he's now somewhere else, and he's just wondering, well, what can I do? I don't know what's going to happen. As such, he goes right to the principal and tries pleading with him to get him to change classes. Specifically, he says that Sissy was upset by it, but the principal says that the person that had them separated was Jim. As such, Odd decides to go ask Jim exactly why they were separated, but when he goes to his room, he can't find him. But he does find a picture of Jim in a disco outfit, and since Jim doesn't like talking about his past, he looks up Jim and the connection to disco movies online, and it turns out Jim was in pretty much a disco B movie when he was younger, and Odd burns it to a DVD with the intent of blackmailing him to getting into classes. As such, before he tells us to Jim, before he can actually do anything with it, he's called Lyoko for the adventure I just described. And when he tries telling the group that this is what he's going to do, absolutely none of them think this is a good idea. They think it's stupid, and pretty much tell him this is just going to lead to bad things. Eventually, though, as such, it does end up getting to Odd as he finally decides, okay, fine, I'm not going to blackmail you. And he returns the CD to Jim, and Jim just kind of decides just to kind of let up on him since Odd says, look, school is hard. And it's just kind of nice having friends like this around. And so Jim says, okay, fine, I'll see what I can do. Hold on a sec. Sorry about that, my dog's right there. He thinks I have food. Anyway, so, yeah, that plot line is essentially just the condensed B plot that has no effect on the major story. However, what is kind of important is the other B plot, so to speak. In this case, it concerns Ulrich and Yumi. It turns out that since summer vacation, Yumi has had time to think, and she wants to talk to Ulrich. Ultimately, it leads to some kind of... Sorry, he just jumped off the bed. It does lead to some kind of some hijinks, as every single time Ulrich wants to talk to Yumi about what she's thinking about, someone interrupts and they don't have a moment alone, so she just delays it. Until eventually, after one too many interruptions, Ulrich just pulls Yumi outside so they can just be alone, and Yumi finally lays it all on the table. You know how one of my criticisms with Ulrich and Yumi's relationship is that it's just all over the map? Like, sometimes they're in a relationship, sometimes they're not. It just keeps backpedaling and going forward. Sometimes it looks like they made a lot of progress, sometimes it looks like they made none. Well, it turns out that's exactly what Yumi was thinking about. Over the course of the summer, she's thought about how they've been interacting as a couple and how their relationship has gone. How sometimes they're a couple, sometimes they're not. Sometimes Yumi's jealous of Ulrich, sometimes Ulrich's jealous of Yumi, and so forth. And she's just wondering what it's all going towards, and she thinks that, and after the summer, she thinks that they need to reevaluate their relationship. As such, while she's not cutting ties with him, she essentially puts him in the friend zone. Something that Ulrich isn't happy with. Now, ultimately, he doesn't let it get to him too much, as after he gets friend zoned, they get called to Lyoko, and thankfully, this showcases that he's gotten some character development, because he doesn't let it get to him throughout the whole mission, and he does still treat Yumi as a friend. But yeah, by the end of the episode, it's clear that he's not happy about it, and based on how how the talk that he and Odd have at the end, this is not the last we'll be hearing of this. So, yeah. But yeah, those are all the plots of the episode. What do I think of it? As a whole, I think this episode of Kolyoko it's fine. It's all right. Again, nothing really major is revealed here. It's just essentially updates on progressions of certain other plots. The only plot that I find insignificant would be the stuff with Odd, since that's resolved, because since it looks like that's resolved by the end of the episode. But the one and honest and but the rest of it I think is all right. Nothing groundbreaking, no big revelations, but there are developments being made. For starters, we see the new status quo. The group's trying to figure out what Xana's doing, and Lyoko's the only way that they can do that. Xana's now trying to destroy Lyoko to cut them off so they can't hurt him anymore. And now we finally see that now that Aelita is pretty much complete, she now has more offensive abilities that she can now use on Lyoko, and she no longer needs Coder to leave Lyoko. She can just be devirtualized like everyone else. So that's another development. And again, another major development that I honestly think is the best part is the stuff with Ulrich and Yumi. And I know that sounds weird considering that I've in the past said that Ulrich's my least favorite member of the Lyoko group, but I think what helps is that it feels like it's still an ongoing plot in this regard. In this case, they actually acknowledge the downfalls of the romantic subplot throughout the previous seasons, how it's just on again, off again, and just everywhere in between. So it actually is nice to actually see the characters acknowledge us and say, look, I think we need to reevaluate this. And on top of that, when it comes to Ulrich, he takes this surprisingly better than he would have in seasons 1 or 2. In seasons 1 or 2, if this had hit him, he would have been grouchy and angry to the point where it would have interfered with the mission. And while he isn't happy about it, it definitely gets to him. At the same time, he does try to keep his eyes on the prize when Lyoko is concerned. When they're in Lyoko, he is concerned for Yumi's safety as he would any other time. And when Odd mentions how he's going to be able to try and blackmail Jim to get him to change classes, Ulrich's like, "Oh, dude, that's not a good idea. Don't do that." He's actually giving sound advice, listening, and he's focusing on the action trying to make sure everyone gets through Lyoko alive and not devirtualized before they can get to their main target. Again, it's character development. While it does bug him, of course, which I think would bug anybody if they've been in such a romantic, and they've been in such a place for as long as Ulrich and Yumi have. At the same time, it showcases that he has matured a little, as now he's not letting this stuff get to him when there's more important things to worry about, like the safety of the world. I like that. And I feel like that and what makes it better too is that like with the stuff with Xana, this feels like it's going to be more of an ongoing plot. And I feel like that if this episode is anything to indicate, Ulrich and Yumi are at least still trying to have a positive relationship with each other. They're still trying to associate. They're still trying to help each other out, even if they're trying to keep their feelings on hold. Again, while they're probably not happy about this, based on everything, how their relationship has been going up to this point, yeah, I think it's probably for the best as well. And I am actually interested to see where it goes from here. Otherwise, though, the rest of the episode is just kind of setting up what's going to happen with this season, where Xana is now evaded the whole World Wide Web. What he's going to do now, in this case, he's going to try and destroy Lyoko so the kids won't be able to get to him. And finally, there's just the whole thing with Aelita now being essentially a full-fledged Lyoko warrior. She still has her admin privileges, but now she can defend herself. She won't die if she drops to 0. It's all good, and I like that. So, yeah, overall, there's no major plot revelations, but the episode does help set up how things are going to be going now in season 3, and I'm perfectly fine with that. So, yeah, overall, just an alright episode. Nothing fantastic, but still pretty alright, and nice to see them setting the foundation for what's going to happen later. So, yeah, that's about it. Thank you for watching. I'm Samuel Johnson, and I'll see you next week. Take care.